Hello, brother. How was your day today? If possible, please let me know where you are on Earth. As for me, my day was quite boring. Let me share it with you. Today at school, I had a bit of a debate with my classmates on the following topics: history, astronomy, and what some might call historical mysteries and unexplained events. The question here is about the shocking secret of the pyramid's true age, and I will share my personal views. Let's analyze it together. Imagine you are standing on a vast, silent desert plateau. The sun beats down, distorting the air into shimmering waves above the sand. Before you, three colossal structures tear the sky, their geometry so perfect, so alien against the raw landscape, that they feel less like buildings and more like crystallized thoughts from a god's mind. You've seen them 1,000 times in pictures, but to be here, to feel their scale press down on you, is to understand that something is profoundly wrong with the story you've been told. After this video, you'll never look at the world the same way. Before the tension gets too high, take a moment to like the episode and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments below, let me know your location and what time it is where you are. I find it fascinating to see where our thoughts are connecting from across the globe. Now dim the lights, prepare yourself, and let's unravel this hidden truth together. You begin your investigation by opening the official record, the one sanctioned by decades of mainstream scholarship. The pages feel smooth, the text authoritative. It presents a story that is, on its surface, both logical and complete. This is the foundation upon which our understanding of the ancient world is built. According to this account, the Great Pyramid of Giza was constructed as a tomb for the 4th dynasty Egyptian pharaoh, Khufu. The timeline is precise. Its creation is dated to a 27-year period around 2560 BC. This firmly plants its origin point approximately 4,500 years in our past. A comfortable distance away ancient, but not unimaginably so. It fits neatly into the grand linear progression of human history that we are all taught, the slow, steady march from primitive hunter-gatherers to the birth of agriculture, the rise of city-states, and finally, the dawn of monumental architecture. You are examining the details of this official construction. The pyramid you read is composed of an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks, most of which are limestone quarried from a nearby ridge. The more significant stones, the hard granite used to construct the internal chambers and passages, were transported from Aswan, over 500 miles to the south. The workforce, contrary to popular myth, was not a mass of slaves toiling under the whip. Instead, they were a dedicated and skilled legion of Egyptian laborers who were housed, fed, and paid for their work. They lived in a sprawling temporary city at the foot of the plateau, a community organized with remarkable efficiency, all in service of a single monumental goal. Their tools were rudimentary by our standards: copper chisels, which are notoriously soft, and dolerite pounders, which are essentially hard, heavy rocks used to bash other rocks into shape. They used ropes, sledges, and an incredible amount of raw manpower, supposedly leveraging vast earthen ramps to raise the stones to their staggering heights. This narrative is the bedrock of modern Egyptology. It is a testament to human ingenuity and the organizational power of an early state. And psychologically, its appeal is immense. It confirms our place at the apex of history. We look back at these supposedly primitive methods and marvel at what they achieved in spite of their limitations. It frames their accomplishment in a way that magnifies our own. The story isn't just a collection of historical facts. It is a critical pillar supporting the entire edifice of linear human progress. A narrative that reassures us that we are the most advanced, most capable version of humanity that has ever existed. To challenge it is to challenge the very story we tell ourselves about who we are. But as you look closer, you begin to notice the frayed edges of this perfectly woven tapestry. You find that the primary evidence linking the pyramid to Khufu is not a grand public inscription. There is no triumphant carving on the pyramid's exterior declaring its creator. Instead, the attribution comes from graffiti discovered in small, inaccessible, relieving chambers above the king's chamber. Scrawled markings that appeared to name the work gangs, one of which was the Friends of Khufu gang. The Great Pyramid, for a monument of such ego-driven scale, is strangely and unnervingly anonymous. The Great Pyramid of Giza is attributed to Pharaoh Khufu of the 4th dynasty. But this attribution hinges on contextual clues and a few hidden marks, not a direct, undeniable claim from the pharaoh himself. This silence is unsettling. It is here that you stumble upon a bizarre and persistent counter-narrative, one that has fascinated historical organizations with limited public records for centuries. These groups, operating in the periphery of mainstream academia, have never been searching for Khufu. They have been obsessed with finding a hall of records, a mythical subterranean library believed to hold the accumulated knowledge of a lost antediluvian civilization. Whispers of this repository have driven countless clandestine expeditions and fueled the study of ancient unsolved ciphers. Some believe the key is hidden within the astronomical alignments of Giza itself, a code that, if broken, would unlock a history that predates the pharaohs by millennia. This relentless, centuries-long quest has nothing to do with the official timeline. It's a search for a ghost, a forgotten chapter of the human story. You can almost feel the psychological tension between these two worlds. On one side, the academic consensus. You turn your attention from the pyramids and walk toward the silent sentinel that lies before them. It is the Great Sphinx, a creature of myth fused with geological reality. The official narrative you hold tells you this monument is inextricably linked to the pyramids it guards. Its face, though battered by time, is widely believed to be a portrait of Pharaoh Khufu, the builder of the second pyramid, placing its creation around 2500 BC. You are reminded of a critical, verifiable fact that is often overlooked. The Sphinx is not a construction. It was not built block by block. It is a sculpture carved directly from the living limestone bedrock of the Giza Plateau. The body of the beast rests within a deep, U-shaped enclosure, the walls of which are made of the very same bedrock from which the Sphinx was excavated. This is not a matter of debate. It is a simple geological truth. The monument and its surrounding ditch are a single, monolithic piece of the earth. This is where the seamless story begins to unravel, not with a whisper, but with the force of a 1,000-year rainstorm. You lower yourself into the enclosure, the air growing still and close. The towering limestone walls surround you, approach the flank of the creature, surface larger and more imposing than any photograph could convey, and you run your hand across the stone. The texture is wrong. You've seen pictures of wind erosion on other monuments in Egypt. It scours the stone horizontally, carving soft layers and leaving harder ones, creating a fluted, undulating pattern like waves on a sandy beach. This is different. Here the rock is ravaged by deep, vertical fissures, some several feet deep, running from the top of the enclosure wall all the way down to its base. The body of the Sphinx itself is marked by the same profound degradation, a rolling, rounded profile that speaks not of wind and sand, but of something else entirely. You are seeing the unmistakable signature of water. This is classical precipitation-induced weathering. You visualize it happening. Torrential rains lashing down, water cascading over the edges of the enclosure, and coursing down the sides of the Sphinx, year after year, century after century, millennium after millennium. Each drop a tiny hammer and chisel, slowly carving these deep runnels into the solid rock. The pattern is undeniable to a geologist's eye. It tells a story of a climate that was wet, rainy, and persistent. And that is the psychological shock. The scientific data is clear. For the last 5,000 years, since the era of the pharaohs and beyond, the Giza Plateau has been a hyperarid desert, just as it is today. It receives, on average, less than an inch of rainfall per year. A light shower today barely dampens the sand, does not cascade down cliff faces and carve channels into solid rock. To find a climate in North Africa capable of inflicting this kind of water damage, you have to rewind the clock. You have to go past the age of the pharaohs, past the founding of the first cities, past the invention of agriculture. You have to travel back more than 10,000 years to a time when the last ice age was ending. And the Sahara was not a desert, but a lush green savanna, drenched by heavy seasonal rains. The geological evidence etched into the stone is screaming a date that is thousands of years older than the one written in the history books. You can almost feel the cognitive dissonance this creates within the halls of academia. The Egyptological consensus is a fortress built on a century of scholarship. When this water erosion evidence was first presented systematically, the reaction was not one of curiosity, but of swift, almost violent. Your mind is still reeling from the implications of the water erosion from that impossible date carved by ancient rains. You lift your gaze from the Sphinx and look past it, to the three colossal monuments that have haunted the human imagination for millennia. From your vantage point, they seem to be arranged with purpose, a deliberate statement on the landscape. The official story you've viewed gives them names and dates, but offers little explanation for their precise placement relative to one another. You are standing before a cosmic puzzle, and you've just found a second critical piece. You pull out a surveyor's map of the Giza Plateau, a simple diagram showing the ground plan of the three pyramids. You observe a verifiable mundane detail, one that is obvious to anyone who studies the layout. The three pyramids are not arranged in a perfect straight line. The first two, the pyramids of Khufu and Kafir, form a near-perfect diagonal. But the third and smallest pyramid, that of Menkaure, is slightly offset to the east of this primary line. For decades, this was seen as little more than a quirk of the site, perhaps a result of challenging terrain or a change in planning. In a complex of such staggering precision, this small error has always been a point of quiet curiosity, a minor imperfection in an otherwise flawless design. But now, you are looking at it through a new lens, the lens of unexplored perspectives. You recall the strange obsession of certain historical organizations with ancient astronomy. It's their belief that the answers lie not buried in the sand, but written in the stars. You come across a controversial theory, one that has been furiously debated for years: the Orion correlation theory. It proposes something so radical, yet so simple, that it sends a shiver down your spine. It suggests that the layout of the three Giza pyramids on the ground is a deliberate, direct imitation of the three stars that form the belt of the constellation Orion. You overlay a star chart on your map of the plateau. The correlation is startling. The two large bright stars, Al-Nodak and Al-Nolam, match the position of the two great pyramids of Khufu and Kafir. And the third, fainter star, Mentaka, is slightly offset from the main line in precisely the same way that Menkaure's pyramid is offset on the ground. The relative sizes of the pyramids even seem to mirror the relative brightness of the stars they represent. It is not just an alignment, it is a map. The Giza Plateau appears to be a perfect terrestrial effigy of a small, specific patch of the night sky. This is where the idea of a secret cipher, one connecting heaven and earth, becomes terrifyingly real. You find yourself drawn into the esoteric principle whispered about by historical organizations for centuries. As above, so below. It is the core tenet of ancient Hermeticism. The belief that the vast astronomical clockwork of the Giza Plateau is one layer of the mystery, a grand design that stretches across millennia. But now you move from the cosmic scale to the microscopic, from the movements of the stars to the scars left in the stone itself. You are no longer looking at the whole. You are examining the individual atoms, the very points of contact where the builders met the bedrock. It is here, in the fine details of their work, that the official story encounters a problem not of logic or interpretation, but of pure physics. You are holding a piece of Aswan granite in your hand. It is cool, heavy, and incredibly hard. Its surface glitters with quartz crystals. On the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, where a diamond is a 10, and talc is a 1, this material is a solid 7 or 8. You review the publicly available, verifiable information about the ancient Egyptian toolkit. The accepted toolkit of Old Kingdom pyramid builders consisted primarily of soft copper chisels and handheld dolerite pounders. Copper is a 3 on the Mohs scale. Dolerite is hard, yes, but to shape granite with it is like trying to carve a sculpture with a hammer. It is a brutal, percussive process, one defined by smashing and battering. It can break stone, but it cannot produce finesse. The tools simply do not match the material. Now you turn your attention to the artifacts themselves, housed in museums or still lying half-buried in the desert sands. You are looking at a granite sarcophagus, a box intended for a pharaoh. The inside corners are perfectly square, not rounded as you would expect from a pounding technique. The surfaces are glass smooth, reflecting the light with an even sheen. Then you see it. A core drill hole, a perfect cylinder bored deep into the solid granite. This is not a rough hole bashed out of the rock. This is a clean, precise tube of empty space. You run your finger along the inside wall of the hole, and you feel a distinct spiral groove, like the threads of a screw. This helical groove is a signature. It is a feed rate. It tells you that the drill which made this hole was boring into one of the hardest stones on Earth at a consistent, powerful, and unyielding pace. Experiments have been conducted to replicate this effect in granite with a primitive bronze or copper tube using sand as an abrasive. The tube would wear away almost instantly, and the pressure required would be immense. Modern masons, looking at these artifacts, shake their heads. They will tell you that to create such a feature today, you would use a diamond-tipped core drill spinning at high RPMs, guided by a fixed machine to ensure a constant downward pressure. The evidence in your hand suggests a level of technology that is, by every modern standard, industrial. It doesn't stop there. You examine saw cuts on massive granite blocks. They are impossibly straight, running for many feet without deviation. If you were using a primitive handsaw with sand, the tool marks in the granite are a physical language, a dialect of impossible precision that speaks of a lost technology. The silence from the official record on this matter is deafening. You feel an intense need to find a Rosetta Stone, not one that translates languages, but one that translates this physical evidence into a human story. If a different history is true, if the Giza site is older than we think, surely the ancient Egyptians themselves must have said something about it. Their civilization was defined by its meticulous record-keeping. They carved their stories onto everything. Did none of them ever write down the truth? You move your search from the quarries and workshops to the quiet, climate-controlled halls of the Cairo Museum. Your focus narrows to a single, unassuming artifact discovered in the 19th century by the French archaeologist Auguste Mariette. He found it in a small ruined chapel near the Great Pyramid, a building he identified as a temple of Isis. The artifact itself is a carved limestone slab, about the size of a tombstone, covered in columns of hieroglyphs. It has come to be known as the inventory stela. You approach the display case, and the first piece of verifiable information you encounter is the official dating. The inventory stela is academically dated to the 26th dynasty, or the Saite period. Around 670 BC, this is a critical, undisputed fact based on the style of the hieroglyphs, the grammar, and the artistic conventions used. This date places the carving of the stela almost 2,000 years after the reign of Khufu, the pharaoh credited with building the Great Pyramid. This chronological gap is the entire basis for the mainstream dismissal of its contents. Egyptologists view it as a piece of archaic fiction, a story written by later priests to give their small temple a more ancient and venerable history by linking it to the legendary figures of the Old Kingdom, seen as a pious forgery, a clever piece of religious marketing from the 7th century BC. But then you read the translation of what is actually written on the stone, and the world tilts on its axis. The stela explicitly describes the activities of Pharaoh Khufu. It speaks of his time on the Giza Plateau, but it does not describe him as a builder. It describes him as a restorer, an archaeologist in his own right. The text states that Khufu was on a mission to inspect the monuments when he found the house of Isis, mistress of the pyramid beside the house of the Sphinx. Read that again? He found it. The text claims that a temple dedicated to the mistress of the pyramid already existed, and that it stood beside a sphinx that was also already there. How could Khufu build the Great Pyramid if a temple dedicated to its goddess was already standing? The inscription goes on. It claims that Khufu built a small pyramid for one of his daughters next to the Great Pyramid, reinforcing the idea that the main structure was a pre-existing monument. And then comes the most explosive passage. The stela mentions the Sphinx directly, noting that it was northwest of the house of Osiris, Lord of Rose-Toe, and that it had been struck by lightning, which had shattered the headdress of the statue. Khufu, the text implies, ordered repairs. This is not the story of a man creating a monument to himself. This is the story of a man tending to sacred heirlooms that were ancient even in his own time. The psychological whiplash is intense. You are looking at the words on the inventory stela hang in the air, a ghost of a story that refuses to be exorcised. You are adrift between two worlds, the solid, well-documented world of academic Egyptology, and a far stranger world hinted at by water erosion, celestial alignments, and now a potentially explosive piece of testimony from the Egyptians themselves. The doubt is no longer a whisper. To resolve this, your investigation must expand. You must break free from the gravitational pull of the Nile Valley, because if a lost chapter of history truly exists, its fingerprints will not be found in just one location. You pull back, your perspective shifting from the sands of Egypt to a different landscape halfway across the ancient world. You are now standing on a barren, rounded hilltop in southeastern Anatolia, in modern-day Turkey. The wind is constant here, a lonely sound sweeping across a dry agricultural landscape. For centuries, this hill was known to locals simply as Göbekli Tepe, which translates to Potbelly Hill. It was an unremarkable feature in the terrain, a place where farmers would occasionally find odd pieces of carved flint and move large limestone slabs out of their fields. Nothing suggested it was anything more than a natural formation. Then, in 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt looked at this hill with fresh eyes. He recognized the signs of immense human activity. His subsequent excavation would unearth what is now arguably the most significant and most disruptive archaeological discovery of the modern era. This is the new, verifiable anchor for your investigation. Göbekli Tepe is a vast ceremonial complex of intricately carved megalithic pillars, and its oldest layers have been carbon dated to approximately 9600 BC. Take a moment to absorb that date. Now, this site is not just old, it is an aberration. You're at least 7,000 years older than the Great Pyramid. It is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It predates the invention of pottery, the invention of writing, and the dawn of agriculture. It was built in what we have always called the Stone Age. You walk through the excavated portions of the site, a series of circular and oval enclosures sunk into the hillside. You are in a forest of stone? The structures are defined by massive T-shaped pillars of limestone, some standing over 18 feet tall and weighing up to 20 tons. They are arranged in circles, connected by crude stone walls, and they are covered, absolutely covered, in art. You see exquisitely carved reliefs of animals, foxes, snakes, boars, gazelles, vultures, and scorpions. And these are not the clumsy scratchings of a primitive people. They are stylized, symbolic, and executed with a confident artistry. The sheer scale and complexity of the site are staggering. It would have required a massive, coordinated workforce, numbering in the hundreds, drawn from a wide region. It implies a shared cosmology, a complex mythology, a sophisticated social organization that archaeologists never dreamed was possible for that time period. The ghost of Göbekli Tepe lingers in your mind, a testament to what primitive hunter-gatherers could achieve. That site provides a powerful precedent, a concrete anchor for the possibility of an advanced, lost civilization. It proves that the potential for such a culture existed in the deep past. Now, you must return to Giza and confront the single most powerful weapon wielded by the defenders of the official timeline. You must enter the sterile, clinical world of the laboratory, the place where history is no longer a story, but a number. You are walking into a high-tech facility. The air hums with the quiet whir of machinery. Before you is the apparatus for radiocarbon dating. It is a monument of 20th century science, the tool that seemingly brought chronological order to the chaos of the ancient world. This brings you to the verifiable, hard data that forms the bedrock of the mainstream Giza timeline. In the 1980s and 90s, a team led by prominent Egyptologist Dr. Mark Lenner conducted an extensive dating project. His team carefully collected dozens of tiny organic fragments, bits of wood, charcoal, reed, and hair found embedded within the mortar used between the great stone blocks of the pyramids. These samples were sent to the world's best labs for blind C14 analysis. The results came back, and they were heralded as the final word on the matter. The dates averaged out to a period between 300 and 400 years older than the accepted reign of Khufu. But this was explained away as the old wood problem. The Egyptians may have used wood from trees that were already centuries old when they were harvested. With this minor adjustment, the C14 dates seem to confirm the 2500 BC timeline almost perfectly. The psychological power of this evidence is immense. It replaces the messy, interpretive world of geology and astronomy with the clean, objective certainty of physics. A number from a machine feels like an indisputable fact. It has no narrative, no bias. It is pure data. In the court of scientific opinion, the carbon dating results were presented as the star witness, the final, irrefutable proof that sealed the case for the traditional timeline. The water erosion, the star alignments, the tool marks, all of it could now be dismissed as anomaly, coincidence, or misinterpretation, because the hard science had spoken. But then, as you examine the methodology more closely, you find the flaw. It is a flaw not in the science of carbon dating itself, but in the logic of its application. The question is not how old the sample is, but what the sample is. You can only carbon date organic material. You cannot carbon date stone. Therefore, the labs did not date the construction of the pyramids. They dated the last time a small piece of wood or charcoal was alive, a piece of wood that then somehow ended up in the mortar. You were dating the mortar, not the pyramid. And this leads to a critical, devastating question. What if the mortar is not original? What if it is from a later phase of repair or restoration? Imagine finding a 21st century receipt tucked into the pages of a book printed in the 1800s. Carbon. You have journeyed from the stars to the stones, from the atomic clock of carbon-14 to the geological clock of water erosion. You've gathered data points that are scientific, precise, and profoundly contradictory. They form the outline of a ghost, lost civilization that built on a scale and with a precision that defies the standard model of history. But data alone is not a story. You need a narrative, a name, a human face for this phantom from the end of the Ice Age. Where do you find the memory of a culture that was supposedly erased from existence? You turn away from the artifacts and toward the oldest stories, to see if a whisper of this forgotten world survived in human myth. Your search leads you not to some dusty scroll of esoteric lore, but to the very heart of Western philosophy, to the dialogues of Plato. He is not a fringe mystic. He is a foundational pillar of rational thought. This is what makes what you find next so deeply unsettling. You pick up two of his later works, the Timaeus and the Critias. It is here, and almost nowhere else in the ancient world, that the story of Atlantis is told. This is the mundane, verifiable fact at the center of the legend. Plato's account states that the story of Atlantis was passed to the Athenian statesman Solon by Egyptian priests at the city of Samos. Solon, one of the 7 sages of Greece, visited Egypt around 600 BC. There the priests, keepers of ancient records, told him that Greek history was that of a child, because their memories had been repeatedly wiped out by cataclysms. The Egyptian records, they claimed, went back much, much further. The story the priests told Solon was that of a mighty island empire, larger than Libya, and Asia combined, located in the Atlantic Ocean, just beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. This was Atlantis. It was a civilization of astonishing sophistication. Plato describes a metropolis built of concentric rings of land and water, connected by massive canals and bridges. He speaks of advanced metallurgy, exotic trade, and a powerful military. At first, the Atlanteans were virtuous and noble, but over time, their divine nature weakened. They became consumed by greed, ambition, and hubris. They waged an imperialistic war against the peoples of the Mediterranean, but were heroically defeated by an ancient prehistoric Athens. Then the end came. In a single day and night of misfortune, Plato writes, the island of Atlantis was swallowed by the sea and vanished, destroyed by violent earthquakes and floods. This is where the story shifts from a fascinating myth to a potentially explosive piece of historical evidence. You are looking for a date, a temporal anchor, and Plato gives you one. The Egyptian priest is specific. He tells Solon that this cataclysm, the story of Atlantis, handed down by Plato, gives a potential name and a cataclysmic end to the ghost civilization you've been tracking. It provides a narrative framework for the impossible date of 9600 BC, but a story, even from a philosopher working, is not proof. You must return from the realm of myth to the hard, unyielding reality of stone. If a technologically advanced mother culture did exist, a culture with, as Plato describes, sophisticated engineering and metallurgy, what would their artifacts look like? Would they leave behind iPhones and laptops for us to find? Or would their technology be so different, so integrated with the natural world, that we might be staring right at it and not even recognize it? You return to the heart of the Great Pyramid, descending through the tight, oppressive corridors into the very center of the megalithic mountain. You are in the king's chamber, a room built entirely of massive red Aswan granite blocks.
Ow.
The air is still heavy and resonant. In the center of this stark chamber sits its sole piece of furniture, a large, lidless, and broken granite box. The official story identifies this as the sarcophagus of Khufu. It is empty. It has, by all accounts, always been empty. But your attention is drawn to a simple logistical fact, a mundane detail that creates a profound paradox. The granite coffer in the king's chamber is too large to fit through the ascending passage that leads to it. This is a verifiable architectural fact. It is not a matter of debate. The box could not have been carried into the room after the pyramid was built. It must have been placed in the chamber as the pyramid was being constructed around it. This single fact transforms the box from a mere tomb furnishing into a central, integral component of the pyramid's original design. It was not an afterthought. It was part of the plan from the very beginning. But it is the object itself, not just its placement, that defies explanation. You run your hand along its surface. It is smooth, but not just smooth, it is geometrically perfect. Engineers who have been granted access to measure it have reported astonishing findings. The surfaces are flat too, within tolerances that are difficult to achieve even today without advanced machinery.
Ow.
The inside is even more remarkable. The internal corners are not rounded, as you would expect from any manual abrasion technique. They are cut with a precision that suggests a guided tool turning a sharp 90-degree angle deep inside the granite. You look at the data collected by modern metrologists. They speak of parallel surfaces, of uniform wall thickness, of a level of precision that is wildly unnecessary for a simple coffin. To achieve this today, you would start with a massive 100-ton block of granite, and then you would have to hollow out over 90% of its internal volume, leaving a perfectly shaped shell. The energy and technology required for such a task are industrial. The official explanation that it was painstakingly hollowed out by hand with dolerite balls and copper. The granite box in the king's chamber is a paradox of precision, an object whose manufacturing details defy the story of its creation. You have been looking at a single component, a workpiece of impossible quality. Now you mentally pull back, your perspective expanding from the confines of the chamber to encompass the entire colossal structure around you. You realize that the precision you witnessed in that single granite coffer is not an anomaly. It is the defining characteristic of the entire Great Pyramid. You are not just looking at a perfectly made box, you are standing inside a perfectly made machine. You turn your focus to the pyramid's most fundamental quality, its placement on the face of the earth. It is a simple, verifiable fact, documented by surveyors for centuries, that the four sides of the Great Pyramid are aligned with breathtaking accuracy to the four cardinal directions: true north, south, east, and west. The average error is minuscule, a deviation of less than 4 minutes of arc, or 1/15 of a single degree. For a structure with a footprint covering more than 13 acres, it's built with 2.3 million blocks of stone, this level of precision is, by any standard, miraculous. This is not a simple feat. The builders were not aligning to magnetic north, which shifts and wanders over time. They were aligning to the planet's rotational axis, a fixed, invisible point in space. To find true north with such accuracy requires a sophisticated understanding of astronomy. You would have to track the stars over long periods, perhaps by building a circular enclosure and marking the rising and setting points of a specific star, then perfectly bisecting the angle between them. Or you could track the sun's shadow throughout the day using a gnomon to find the exact moment of noon. These are not the methods of a primitive culture, guessing at directions. These are the methods of practiced surveyors, geodesists, and astronomers. The psychological implication of this precision is immense. Why would a culture go to such extraordinary lengths for a tomb? Why would a pharaoh's final resting place require an alignment to the planet's axis with a tolerance that would impress a modern airport runway engineer? Official narrative explains it as a matter of religious symbolism, desire to align the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. The Dulapek cipher embedded in the pyramid's stones suggests a story of immense duration, a plan initiated in one age and completed in another. Plato gave this forgotten epoch a name, Atlantis. a specific date for its demise date that aligns with the geological and astronomical evidence you've uncovered. But was Plato's account passed down through Egyptian priests, an isolated anomaly? Or was he recording a local chapter of a much larger, global story? To find out, you must broaden your search beyond the written records of philosophers and into the very DNA of human culture. Our oral traditions, our oldest myths, are looking for a scar on the collective human memory. You begin to sift through the vast library of world mythology, and almost immediately you discover a stunning and verifiable pattern. More than 500 cultures across the globe, on every inhabited continent, have a foundational myth about a great flood that destroyed a former world. This isn't just a pattern, it's a near-universal human story. You find it in the Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Mesopotamia, a tale far older than the Bible, where the sage Utnapishtim is instructed to build a great boat to survive a deluge sent by angry gods. You find it in the Hindu story of Manu, who was warned by the god Vishnu, in the form of a fish, to build a ship to save himself from a world-ending flood. You find it among the Aztecs of Mexico, the Inca of Peru, the Aboriginal tribes of Australia, and the Lakota people of North America. These cultures were separated by vast oceans and millennia of time. They had no possible contact with one another. And yet, they all tell the same story. The psychological weight of this discovery is staggering. The mainstream academic explanation, the one that maintains the comfortable, linear progression of history, posits that this is a simple case of parallel thinking. Local floods are a common and terrifying experience for early societies living near rivers and coastlines. It is only natural, the argument goes, that they would create myths to explain these traumatic local events, and that these myths would share certain basic elements. But as you look closer at the details, this explanation begins to feel thin, insufficient to the point of absurdity. The stories are not just similar, they are often structurally identical. You identify a recurring sequence of events, a narrative template that repeats with uncanny consistency across the globe. A golden age of humanity becomes corrupt, arrogant, or wicked. The gods, or the universal flood myth, provides a powerful human echo of a global cataclysm, a story that aligns with the dramatic end of the last ice age. You've traced the memories of a great reset. Now you must return to the Giza Plateau, to the silent stone witness that started this entire line of inquiry, the Sphinx. You have already seen the geological evidence of its immense antiquity, the story of rain carved into its body, but you have yet to confront the most obvious, and perhaps most misleading, feature of the entire monument, its face. You are standing before the Sphinx again, looking at it head-on. The official narrative, the one accepted by nearly all mainstream Egyptologists, is clear and concise. The face of the Sphinx is a portrait of the pharaoh Kafir, the builder of the second pyramid. This identification is the primary, and arguably the only, piece of evidence that anchors the monument to the Fourth Dynasty. Around 2500 BC, this is the linchpin of the entire conventional timeline. But where does this identification come from? You discover a verifiable and somewhat surprising fact. There are no Old Kingdom inscriptions whatsoever that explicitly state that Kafir carved the Sphinx or that its face is his. The attribution is based entirely on circumstantial evidence. The Sphinx is located next to the causeway leading to Kafir's pyramid, and the face bears a stylistic resemblance to other known and labeled statues of that pharaoh. This stylistic argument is the foundation of the entire theory. But you are a skeptic. You are a detective. You do not accept resemblance as proof. You decide to look closer, not as an art historian, but as a forensic analyst. You pull up a photograph of a known, authenticated statue of Kafir from the Cairo Museum. It is a masterpiece, a regal and powerful portrait. You place it side by side with a direct frontal photograph of the Sphinx's head. And immediately, something is deeply wrong. The proportions are all off. You don't need to be a sculptor to see it. The head of the Sphinx is ridiculously, almost comically, small in relation to its massive leonine body. A real lion's head is huge, a powerful extension of its shoulders and chest. Its head looks like it was shrunk, like a tiny pinhead placed on a giant frame. It's an aesthetic disaster. Why would the master builders of the pyramids, obsessed with proportion and harmony, commit such a fundamental and obvious artistic error? The face of the Sphinx is a mask, a pharaonic rebranding slapped onto a monument of immense antiquity. This act of historical editing, of overwriting the past, is a clue in itself. It suggests that the pharaohs were not the originators, but the inheritors of a sacred landscape. But was Giza an isolated case? Was this pattern of impossibly advanced stonework, later co-opted by the dynastic Egyptians, a one-off anomaly? To answer that, your investigation must travel a few miles south of Giza, to the vast, sprawling necropolis of Saqqara, the ancient burial ground for the city of Memphis. You leave the open sun-scorched plateau and descend beneath the desert floor. You are entering a network of subterranean tunnels, hand-carved from the limestone bedrock. The air grows cool and stale, thick with the silence of millennia. The only sound is the echo of your own footsteps on the dusty floor. Your flashlight beam cuts through the oppressive darkness, revealing a long, arched gallery stretching out before you, and then you see them. Tucked into alcoves hewn crudely from the tunnel walls are a series of colossal black boxes. This is the Serapeum of Saqqara. Your research provides you with the verifiable historical context. Discovered in 1851 by Auguste Mariette, the Serapeum is officially identified as the burial place for the sacred Apis bulls. In ancient Egyptian religion, the Apis was a living bull identified by specific sacred markings, believed to be an incarnation of the god Ptah. When one of these revered animals died, it was mummified and interred with the pomp and ceremony befitting a king. This subterranean complex, the official story concludes, was their final resting place. This explanation seems straightforward, another testament to the unique and elaborate religious beliefs of the ancient Egyptians. But as you approach the first of these sarcophagi, the official story begins to evaporate like a mirage. The object before you is not just a coffin. It is a statement of impossibility. It is a monolithic box, carved from a single block of Aswan granite, the same hard crystalline stone used in the king's chamber. It measures roughly 13 feet long, 7 feet wide, and 11 feet high. The box alone is estimated to weigh 70 tons. The lid, also a single solid block of granite, adds another 30 tons. You are looking at a 100-ton object, and there are 24 of them in this tunnel system. The granite boxes of the Serapeum represent a manufacturing capability that seems utterly disconnected from the dynastic Egyptian toolkit. You have seen precision that screams machinery and a scale that defies simple manual labor. This repeated pattern of impossible stonework in the pyramid cores and the casing stones. In the sarcophages, the central nagging problem. The official narrative requires you to believe in a level of artistry and patience that borders on the superhuman. But what if the problem is not with the craftsman? What if the problem is with our assumption about the material itself? What if the blocks weren't carved at all? You are standing at the base of the Great Pyramid, looking up at the tiers of weathered limestone blocks. The standard view is that each of these multi-ton stones was quarried miles away, transported to the site, and then hauled up massive ramps into position. It is a story of brute force. But now, you entertain a radical and controversial alternative, the geopilumar hypothesis. This theory proposes that the pyramid blocks are not quarried natural stone, but are in fact an extremely sophisticated form of ancient concrete or geopilumar cast directly in place. This brings you to a simple, verifiable observation that you can make yourself. Look closely at the joints between the massive blocks, while the external casing stones were fitted with laser-like precision. The core masonry blocks of the Great Pyramid often have irregular, undulating joints between them. In some places, the gaps are wide and filled with mortar. In others, the blocks fit together so snugly that you can insert a knife blade. But they are not the perfectly straight lines you would expect from saw-cut quarried stone. They look almost organic, as if one block was poured and set, and the next was poured against it, taking its shape. This is the core idea championed by Professor Joseph David Ovitz, a French materials scientist. He did not start with archaeology. He started with chemistry. His research demonstrated that a simple mixture of natron, a type of salt abundant in Egypt, lime, and kaolin clay, materials readily available to the ancient Egyptians, could be mixed with limestone rubble from a quarry to create a slurry. This slurry could then be carried up the pyramid in buckets or bags of far The Dendera light glows in your mind, a phantom schematic for a lost technology. Suggests a scientific legacy, a body of knowledge that is profoundly out of place in the ancient world. Such knowledge does not appear from a vacuum. It must be inherited. It must be passed down, protected and preserved by a lineage of keepers. If the dynastic Egyptians were using even a fraction of this forgotten science, who were their teachers? To find the answer, you must look for the seams in their own historical records, for the moments where they themselves admit that their history did not begin with them. You turn your attention to one of the most important surviving documents from ancient Egypt, the Turin King List. This is not a grand stone monument, but a fragile, heavily damaged papyrus dating to the reign of Ramesses II. Around 1250 BC, it is a mundane historical artifact, a tax roll on one side, but its reverse contains something extraordinary. The Turin King List is a comprehensive chronological list of all the kings of Egypt, and its initial sections list dynasties of gods and demigods who reigned for tens of thousands of years before the first mortal pharaoh. Meanies, this is a verifiable, though deeply puzzling, fact of the historical record. The mainstream Egyptological interpretation is, as always, straightforward and dismissive. The first part of the list, they contend, is pure mythology. It is a mythic preamble, a way for the pharaohs to establish a divine ancestry, tracing their lineage back to the gods themselves. The impossibly long reigns, thousands of years for a single ruler, are clear proof that this is not to be taken as literal history. It is the Egyptian equivalent of the Greek gods on Mount Olympus, story of a divine golden age before the messy reality of human kings. This section of the text is therefore cordoned off, placed in the category of religion, not history. But you are a skeptic of comfortable explanations. Look closer at the damaged papyrus, at the names and the numbers. After the reigns of the great gods like Ptah, Ra, and Osiris, the list details a new category of rulers. They are not quite gods, but not yet men. The papyrus calls them the Shemsu Hortha, followers of Horus, or sometimes translated as the companions of Horus. According to the Turin list, this specific group of rulers reigned for an astonishing 13,420 years, bridging the gap between the age of the gods and the beginning. The geopolymer theory offers a stunningly elegant solution to the physical construction of the pyramids, replacing brute force with brilliant chemistry. It suggests the builders were not just master masons, but alchemists on an industrial scale. This opens up a new and disorienting line of inquiry. If they possessed such a sophisticated, non-obvious technology for building, what other forms of lost science might they have commanded? Were their secrets confined to materials science, or did they extend into other, more energetic realms? Your investigation takes you south from Saqqara, up the Nile, to one of the best-preserved temple complexes in all of Egypt, the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. You are in a structure from the Ptolemaic period, relatively late in Egyptian history, but it is famously built on the foundations of much, much older temples. The priests of Dendera were known for their obsession with preserving ancient knowledge. You descend into a dark, cramped crypt beneath the main temple floor. The air is thick and still. This was a place for storing sacred objects and ritual texts, a vault for the temple's most profound secrets. And on the wall of this subterranean chamber, you find one of the most bizarre and controversial reliefs in all of Egypt. You are looking at what has become known as the Dendera light. The mundane, verifiable description is simple enough. The relief depicts several elongated, pear-shaped objects, each with a long, snake-like filament running through its center. These objects are being held up by human figures. At the base of each bulb, the filament connects to a lotus flower, from which a cable or stem runs to a small, box-like object that looks for all the world like a jed pillar, a symbol often associated with stability and power, but also with the god Osiris. This is the undisputed imagery. The mainstream Egyptological interpretation is purely symbolic. The pear-shaped object is the womb of the sky goddess, Nut. The snake inside represents the serpent god Harsemptis, being born from the lotus flower, which symbolizes creation. The entire scene, the Shemsu Hor. The name echoes from the torn papyrus, a ghost lineage of enlightened rulers who were the supposed source of Egypt's foundational knowledge. They are the potential architects, the keepers of a science that built the impossible. But what was the ultimate purpose of this science? Is it merely to build grand, silent memorials to a lost age? Or was the architecture itself the technology? Is the primary function of these structures not symbolic, but operational? To find the answer, you must return once more to the very heart of the machine, the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid. You are back inside the granite core, the air still and heavy with an almost tangible pressure. Your flashlight illuminates walls made of colossal red granite blocks, fitted together with a precision that seems to fuse them into a single monolithic whole. You are struck again by the verifiable, mundane fact that sets this room apart from almost any other high-status chamber in ancient Egypt. The king's chamber is utterly, almost aggressively, devoid of any inscriptions or decorations. There are no beautiful paintings, no columns of hieroglyphs praising the pharaoh, no scenes from the Book of the Dead to guide the soul. There is only stark, polished, functional granite. For a culture that carved and painted on every available surface, this sterile emptiness is not just an anomaly. It is a profound statement. It is the architectural equivalent of silence. In the 20th and 21st centuries, a new kind of explorer has entered this chamber. It's not with trowels and brushes, but with sensitive audio equipment, spectrum analyzers, and oscilloscopes. They came not to read the walls, but to listen to them. And they discovered that the king's chamber is not silent at all. It is, in fact, an extraordinary acoustic environment. It is a finely tuned, the pyramid hums in your imagination, a machine designed not just to sit on the earth, but to listen to it, to amplify its heartbeat into a chord that could alter consciousness itself. This vision of a lost, sophisticated science is exhilarating, but it is a science without a clear beginning or end. You have a potential start date, 10,500 BC, but you also have a narrative of cataclysm, the flood myths, the sinking of Atlantis. If this advanced civilization, these Shemsu Hor, were so brilliant, how did they fall? What could possibly bring such a golden age to a sudden catastrophic close? To find the answer, you must turn from archaeology and mythology to one of the most dynamic and contentious fields of modern science, paleoclimatology. You are looking for a murder weapon, a culprit capable of wiping a global civilization off the map. Your search leads you to a period of planetary trauma so violent and so abrupt that it has rewritten our understanding of Earth's recent history. This is the Younger Dryas. You begin with the verifiable, mainstream scientific consensus. For decades, the standard explanation for this climate reversal was the ice dam theory. It proposed that a massive glacial lake in North America, Lake Agassiz, suddenly burst its ice dam and drained a colossal volume of fresh, cold water into the North Atlantic Ocean. This influx of fresh water, the theory went, shut down the thermaline circulation, the great ocean conveyor belt that carries warm water from the tropics to the north, plunging the northern hemisphere into a deep freeze. It was a plausible, Earth-based explanation. But then, a new, far more terrifying theory emerged, championed by a growing number of scientists from diverse fields. It is known as the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. This theory proposes that the trigger for the cataclysm was not terrestrial, but cosmic. The culprit was a disintegrating comet. The hypothesis suggests that around 12,800 years ago, the Earth passed through the dense debris stream of a large, fragmenting comet. This resulted in multiple airbursts and impacts across the globe, primarily over the North American ice sheet. These impacts were not necessarily from a single giant asteroid creating a massive crater, or more like a shotgun blast from space. Thousands of Tunguska-like events happening simultaneously. The evidence for this cosmic event is compelling and growing. The black mat, across more than 50 sites in North and South America. Geologists have found a distinct, thin black layer in the sediment dated precisely to the start of the Younger Dryas. This layer is rich in materials associated with extraterrestrial impacts, nanodomans. Within this black mat, scientists have found millions of microscopic diamonds, which can only be formed under the extreme temperature and pressure of a cosmic impact. Melt glass and spherules, the layer also contains glassy spherules and melted rock, evidence of temperatures exceeding to 200 degrees Celsius, 992 degrees Fahrenheit. Far hotter than any known terrestrial volcano or forest fire. Platinum spike. There is a pronounced platinum spike in the younger Dryas boundary layer all over the world. Platinum is rare on Earth's surface, but abundant in asteroids and comets. This is the bizarre central focus of a dedicated research group. A coalition of geologists, physicists, and astronomers known simply as the Comet Research Group. They are not fringe theorists. The younger Dryas impact provides a devastatingly effective reset button for civilization. It's a plausible mechanism for the fall of a hypothetical golden age, a global cataclysm that would have shattered societies and erased all but the most resilient traces of their existence. You can imagine the survivors, the Shemsu Hor, huddled together, their world in ruins, their libraries destroyed, their science shattered. All that remains is memory, tradition, and the foundational principles of their lost knowledge. Now, you must look for the evidence of this reboot. If dynastic Egypt was a legacy project built by the students of these survivors, what would that legacy look like? How would a fully formed, highly complex system of knowledge appear in the archaeological record? Your investigation shifts from geology to linguistics, from the study of rocks to the study of symbols. You are examining the very birth of writing in ancient Egypt. Here you discover a profound and deeply puzzling anomaly. Unlike other ancient writing systems like Mesopotamian cuneiform, which show a clear, centuries-long evolution from simple pictographs to complex abstract symbols, Egyptian hieroglyphs appear in the archaeological record suddenly, around 3200 BC, already fully formed and breathtakingly complex. This is a verifiable and widely acknowledged fact among linguists and Egyptologists. Think of cuneiform. Its earliest forms are simple pictures scratched into clay, as drawing of a head of barley to represent barley, a drawing of a head to represent a person. Over hundreds of years, these pictures became more abstract, more stylized, eventually evolving into the wedge-shaped marks we recognize. You can watch the evolution happen step by step. You can see the system learning, growing, and becoming more efficient over time. With Egyptian hieroglyphs, there is no such period of infancy. From the moment they appear on the earliest artifacts, like the Narmer palette, the system is already a complete, multi-layered, a stunningly sophisticated form of communication. It is not just a collection of pretty pictures. It is a complex interplay of three different kinds of signs operating simultaneously. Logograms. A picture that represents the whole word, for example. A picture of a house means house. Phonograms. A picture that represents a sound, like a letter in our alphabet, for example. A picture of a mouth. Rho is used to represent the AR sound. Determinatives. A silent picture placed at the end of a word to indicate its general category, for example, adding a picture of a man after a name to show it's a person's name. To have all three of these complex linguistic mechanisms operating together from day one is like a baby being born speaking in full, grammatically correct sentences. There are no primitive hieroglyphs. The system appears in a flash of brilliance, with its intricate grammar, its vast vocabulary, and its artistic perfection already in place. The official explanation is simply that we haven't found the earlier word developmental stages yet, that they must have existed, perhaps written on perishable materials like papyrus or wood that have since rotted away. This is the missing evidence argument. It is plausible, but it is also an argument from silence. The psychological dimension here is critical. The hieroglyphs appear in a flash of fully formed genius, another piece of the puzzle that suggests a legacy inherited rather than a technology developed. You have now assembled an extraordinary collection of anomalies. You have water erosion that defies the climate record, celestial alignments that defy the timeline, stonework that defies the toolkit, texts that defy the official story, and a global myth that defies coincidence. On its own, could perhaps be dismissed, but together they form a mosaic, a coherent picture of a lost chapter of human history. And yet, the official, academic narrative remains unchanged, a fortress of certainty against this rising tide of doubt. The most profound mystery is no longer in the stones or the stars, but in the human mind itself. Why is this new picture so violently rejected? You must now become a psychologist, an analyst of institutional behavior. Your investigation turns to the history and philosophy of science. Here you encountered the seminal work of the physicist and philosopher Thomas Kuhn, who in his landmark 1962 book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, introduced a concept that permanently changed how we view scientific progress. This is your verifiable fact for this section. Kuhn argued that science does not progress in a smooth, linear accumulation of knowledge, but through violent, revolutionary shifts in worldview, which he called paradigm shifts. A paradigm, in Kuhn's terms, is the entire constellation of beliefs, values, and techniques shared by the members of a given scientific community. It's the box within which normal science operates. The job of a normal scientist, whether an Egyptologist or a physicist, is not to challenge the paradigm but to work within it, solving puzzles that the paradigm predicts should be solvable. They are essentially filling in the details of a map whose basic geography is already agreed upon. The Giza pyramids were built by Khufu around 2500 BC. This is the paradigm. The puzzles are things like, which specific ramp system did they use? Or how exactly was the workforce organized? But then, anomalies begin to appear, puzzles that refuse to be solved. A piece of evidence emerges that simply does not fit in the box. At first, the scientific community ignores it. If it persists, they try to explain it away. The water erosion on the Sphinx, it's just unusual wind erosion. The Orion correlation, a trick of statistics. The advanced tool marks, superhuman patience. But the anomalies continue to accumulate. One anomaly can be dismissed. 10 anomalies become a problem. 100 anomalies, all pointing in the same direction, precipitate a crisis. The old paradigm, the old map, no longer matches the territory. It is during this crisis that a new paradigm can emerge, a new theory that not only explains everything the old one did, but also elegantly explains all the anomalies the old one could not. This transition, Kuhn showed, is never peaceful. It is a war. The guardians of the old paradigm do not give up their worldview just because of new evidence. Their entire careers, their reputations, the value of their life's work are built upon the old model. This triggers a powerful psychological defense mechanism, cognitive dissonance. It is profoundly uncomfortable to hold two contradictory ideas. I am an expert whose life is dedicated to the truth, and my entire understanding of the truth might. The battle of paradigms frames the entire controversy. It's a struggle between an entrenched, dogmatic view and a rising tide of multidisciplinary evidence. You've traced this evidence through geology, astronomy, engineering, and myth. But there is one more domain to explore, perhaps the strangest and most controversial of all, the realm of psychic phenomena and trance channeling. Here the rules of evidence dissolve completely, and you enter a world of pure information, untethered from physical proof but possessing a strange and compelling internal consistency. Your investigation leads you to the life and work of Edgar Cayce, one of the most documented and studied psychics of the 20th century. Between 1901 and his death in 1945, Cayce gave over 14,000 readings, stenographically recorded transcripts of statements he made while in a self-induced trance state. This is the verifiable, mundane fact of his life. Edgar Cayce, a man with only an 8th grade education, would lie down, enter a trance, and deliver highly detailed and often medically accurate diagnoses for people he had never met, as well as elaborate discourses on history, philosophy, and cosmology. His work is preserved by his non-profit organization, the Association for Research and Enlightenment ARE, which has made his readings available for study. The mainstream scientific view, of course, dismisses Cayce entirely. He is labeled a charlatan, a clever fraud, or at best, a man who is deluded by his own subconscious mind. The medical information is explained as a combination of folk remedies, lucky guesses, and the placebo effect. His historical pronouncements are seen as a pastiche of popular esoteric ideas of his time, a jumble of theosophy, Rosicrucianism, and pulp fantasy. This is the standard, skeptical position. But you decide to push past the wall of dismissal and actually read what he said, specifically about ancient Egypt and the Great Pyramid. And what you find is utterly astonishing. In hundreds of readings given over a period of decades, Cayce laid out a detailed and consistent alternative history that predates almost all of the modern scientific theories you have been investigating. Long before the Orion correlation, Theory before the water erosion evidence on the Sphinx was seriously debated before the discovery of Göbekli Tepe. Case was providing dates and details that would only be corroborated by science decades after his death. In his trance state, Case stated that the Great Pyramid was not built by the dynastic Egyptians. He claimed it was designed and its construction initiated by a high priest named Ada in collaboration with Hermes and a figure named Thoth, who were survivors of the final destruction of Atlantis. He gave a startlingly specific date for this event, said the pyramid's construction began around 10,500 BC. The number hangs in the air, the exact same date that would later emerge from the astronomical alignments of the pyramids and the geological weathering on the Sphinx. Case, with no scientific background in the 1930s, produced the same date that would become the centerpiece of the alternative history movement 60 years later. He went further, claimed the pyramid was not a tomb but a hall of initiation, a spiritual center for healing and raising consciousness, a concept that aligns perfectly with the acoustic resonance theory. He said its purpose was to preserve the knowledge of the Law of One, the unified science of the Atlantean civilization. And most famously, he prophesied the discovery of a Hall of Records, a hidden chamber containing the physical records of Atlantis. He specified its location beneath the paws of the Sphinx. This prophecy has, for better or worse, fueled decades of fringe expeditions and research at the Giza Plateau. This is the bizarre and almost fanatical obsession of a global community of Case followers. For them, the readings are not theories. They are scripture. Their cipher is what they call prophetic validation. Their quirky belief is that Case's uncanny accuracy on other subjects, especially medicine, lends credibility to his historical statements. They point to cases where Case gave detailed, accurate medical diagnoses for individuals from a distance or predicted future events. If he was right about those things, they argue, why should we assume he was wrong about history? The prophecies of Edgar Case provide a narrative framework that is as stunningly detailed as it is scientifically inadmissible. His disembodied voice from the past echoes the date of 10,500 BC, a number that has become the gravitational center of this entire mystery. You have seen evidence of impossible precision in the finished products, the pyramids, the sarcophagi. What of the process itself? Is there any evidence on the ground, a smoking gun left behind in the workshop, that could speak to the true nature of the builder's technology? Your journey takes you back to the source of the granite, to the ancient quarries of Aswan in southern Egypt. It is here that the raw material for the most impressive feats of Egyptian stonework was harvested. And it is here, still lying in its quarry bed, that you find one of the most enigmatic and revealing artifacts in all of Egypt, the unfinished obelisk. You stand before a colossal granite monolith, a testament to ambition that outstripped even the incredible capabilities of its creators. This is your simple, verifiable fact, the unfinished obelisk. If it had been completed and erected, would have stood nearly 137 feet tall and weighed an estimated 1,200 tons. It would have been the single largest piece of stone ever quarried in human history. It lies here, fused to the bedrock from which it was being carved, abandoned mid-creation because a series of large cracks appeared in the granite, rendering it useless. The official story of how this behemoth was being shaped is taught to every visitor. The quarrymen, using nothing more than handheld dolerite pounders, small, basketball-sized balls of a harder stone, would relentlessly bash away at the granite, creating a trench around the obelisk. They would slowly, painstakingly pulverize the granite into dust, freeing the monolith from the surrounding bedrock. The evidence for this is visible everywhere. Thousands of these dolerite balls have been found in the Aswan quarries. To believe this, you must envision an army of workers, for years on end, in the blistering sun, simply smashing rock against rock to achieve their goal. But as you descend into the trench alongside the obelisk, the dolerite pounding theory begins to feel deeply, profoundly inadequate. You look at the walls of the trench. They are not the rough, pockmarked surfaces you would expect from millions of random impacts. In many places, the walls are scooped out in long vertical channels, as if a giant ice cream scoop had been systematically dragged down the granite, removing it in huge, efficient swaths. The scale of material removal is immense. You are witnessing a process that seems to defy the proposed tool. The energy required to pulverize this much granite is astronomical. Engineers have calculated the sheer inefficiency of the pounding method, suggesting it would take a workforce of thousands, many years. Perhaps longer than a pharaoh's entire reign to complete just this one obelisk.
Ow.
And this was supposed to be a standard industrial process. This is where the psychological dissonance becomes acute. To accept the official story, you must believe in a level of human endurance and a tolerance for mind-numbing, brutally inefficient labor that has no parallel. It's a story that glorifies human toil, but it does so at the expense of logic and efficiency. An alternative possibility begins to form in your mind. What if the dolerite balls were not the primary tool? What if they were part of a secondary cleanup process, used to smooth surfaces after a much more powerful and efficient technology had done the heavy lifting? You discover the quirky and obsessive work of a handful of independent engineers and geologists who have spent years studying the quarry. Their fringe theory is known as the thermal disaggregation cipher. They believe the builders used a sophisticated form of thermal shock to quarry the granite. Their cipher proposes that the builders would heat the granite to a very high temperature, perhaps using a focused solar device or some other lost technology, and then rapidly quench it with water. The extreme temperature differential would cause the outer layers of the granite to crack and spall away, allowing for the rapid removal of large amounts of material. The scoop marks on the trench walls, in their view, are not tool marks from pounding. They are the scars left by this repeated process of heating and spalling. The dolerite balls were then used to brush away the loosened, fractured rock. This theory neatly explains the scoop-like patterns and the sheer speed and efficiency required to undertake such monumental projects. It transforms the builders from patient laborers into applied physicists, masters of thermodynamics. The bizarre detail that fuels this theory is the presence of the cracks that doomed the obelisk. The official story says these were natural flaws in the stone, discovered too late. The thermal shock theory offers another possibility. The cracks were induced by the quarrying process itself. The unfinished obelisk lies silent in its quarry, a monument to an industrial process that was powerful yet fallible. It is a frozen moment of creation. But the Great Pyramid itself is not frozen. It is a finished product that continues to evolve, not by the addition of new stones, but by the slow revelation of its deepest secrets. For centuries, explorers, scholars, and treasure hunters believed they had mapped its every passage and chamber. They were wrong. The age of discovery inside the pyramid is not over. It has just begun, and the new explorers are armed not with dynamite, but with particles from the cosmos. You now turn your attention to the most cutting-edge investigation ever conducted at Giza. This is the Scam Pyramids Project, a mission launched in 2015 by a team of international scientists. Their approach is straight out of science fiction. This is the verifiable modern fact. The Scam Pyramids Project used a non-invasive technology called cosmic ray muon tomography to peer inside the Great Pyramid. Muons are subatomic particles created when cosmic rays smash into the Earth's upper atmosphere. They rain down on the surface constantly, and they can pass through hundreds of feet of solid rock. By placing highly sensitive detectors inside and around the pyramid, scientists can track the paths of these muons. Where the rock is dense, fewer muons get through. Where there is an empty space, a void, or a chamber, more muons get through. By triangulating the paths of millions of these particles over many months, can create a three-dimensional X-ray of the pyramid's interior. The team set up their detectors and began the slow, patient process of data collection. In 2016, they announced their first discovery, a small, previously unknown corridor-like void located behind the large chevron blocks that form an archway above the pyramid's original descending entrance. Then, in late 2017, they announced something that sent shockwaves through the worlds of archaeology and physics. They had found something enormous. Located directly above the magnificent Grand Gallery, the team detected a massive, previously unknown void. It was at least 30 meters, nearly 100 feet long, and had a cross-section similar to the Grand Gallery itself. They named it the Scam Pyramids Big Void, or SPBV. It was the first major structural discovery inside the Great Pyramid. Since the Middle Ages, the pyramid, which we thought we knew so well, had been holding on to a secret space the size of a passenger airplane's fuselage. In early 2023, discovery was made even more tangible when the team managed to drill a tiny hole and feed an endoscopic camera into the smaller, north-face corridor, revealing a narrow, empty passageway with a gabled ceiling, the first images from inside a new part of the pyramid in centuries. The psychological reaction from the academic establishment was a fascinating case study in paradigm defense. The immediate response from many Egyptologists was not one of unbridled excitement, but of extreme caution and dismissal. They insisted it was not a chamber. It was most likely a construction. Gap. An empty space left intentionally by the builders to relieve pressure on the grand gallery below. It was a structural quirk, a mundane feature of the building process, and certainly not a place of any ritual or historical significance. They were attempting to absorb this revolutionary discovery by classifying it as a known, uninteresting feature. It was an effort to shrink the anomaly until it could fit back inside the existing box. But the data is the data. There is a massive, undiscovered space inside the Great Pyramid, and its placement, directly above the Grand Galleria chamber, that itself is an acoustic and architectural marvels, deeply suggestive. This is the central obsession of a quirky, modern-day historical organization that calls themselves the Void Cartographers. This group, a loose collective of architects, physicists, and software engineers, believes the Scam Pyramids data is the key to unlocking what they call the functional blueprint cipher. Their bizarre theory is that the Great Pyramid is a solid-state machine and that the voids are not empty spaces, but essential components. The known chambers, kings, queens, subterranean, are just the interface. The true working parts are hidden. The grand gallery they propose was a resonant waveguide, and the newly discovered a big void above it acted as a resonant capacitor or a harmonic amplifier. A second chamber designed to interact with the energy focused by the one below. The cipher for them is that the pyramid's true function can only be understood by mapping the relationship between all the voids, both known and unknown. They believe Edgar Case's Hall of Records is not just one room, but the entire network of hidden chambers. And the information is not stored on scrolls, but is encoded in the very vibrational frequencies the chambers were designed to generate. You are left staring at a ghostly image on a computer screen, a modern X-ray. You have reached the summit of a mountain of anomalies. For weeks, months, perhaps years, you have been a detective wandering through a labyrinth of disconnected clues, each one a paradox that twisted the official story into knots. You have felt the psychological strain of holding contradictory ideas, the frustration of unexplained evidence, and the institutional resistance to change. But now, you step back. You lay all the pieces out on the table before you: the geological report, the star chart, the engineering analysis, the mythological transcript, the psychic's prophecy. And you begin to do the one thing the specialists in their narrow fields have refused to do. You begin to connect them. You are no longer just collecting data. You're synthesizing a story. You start with the two great clocks. Take the geological clock of the Sphinx, its face weathered by millennia of rain it was never supposed to have seen, and you place it next to the astronomical clock of the pyramids. Their ground plan, a perfect map of Orion's belt. Both clocks, independent and scientific, point to the same impossibly remote epoch, circa 10,500 BC. This date becomes your new anchor, the foundation of a new timeline. What happened in that ancient past? You pull in the evidence for the Younger Dryas impact, the black matte layer with its nano-diamonds and platinum spike. You see the great ice sheets flash melting, the sea levels rising catastrophically, the world plunging into a new ice age. You see the scientific mechanism for the global flood. And then you overlay the human memory of that event, the 500 flood myths from every corner of the globe, and Plato's specific, dated account of a brilliant maritime empire called Atlantis, which was destroyed by flood and earthquake 9,000 years before his time. The science provides the event. The myths provide the eyewitness testimony. They lock together perfectly. Who survived this apocalypse? You look to the Egyptians' own records, to the Turin king list. You see the reign of the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus, an enlightened group who supposedly ruled for over 13,000 years before the first human pharaoh. You no longer see them as mythical demigods. You see them as they must have been, the traumatized, highly advanced human survivors of the cataclysm. The Atlantean refugees who settled in the Nile Valley, carrying with them the embers of their lost world's science. What was this science? You see it in the precision of their work? You see the impossible granite boxes of the Serapeum, the signature of advanced machining on stones harder than iron? You see the elegant logic of the geopolymer theory, a chemistry that turns stone to liquid and back again? You see the faint glow of the dendera light, a schematic for a lost form of energy. You see the silent instruction in the unfinished obelisk, a lesson in a powerful quarrying technology that could go catastrophically wrong. The legacy of the Shemsu Hor was not just memory, it was a body of applied physics, chemistry, and engineering. Why did they build at Giza? You see now that it was never about a tomb. Pyramids were a machine, an instrument, their perfect alignment to the cardinal points, their internal shafts targeting specific stars, their acoustically resonant chambers. It all points to a functional purpose. The Giza Plateau was a grand project to reboot their science, a machine designed to interact with the Earth and the stars, perhaps as an energy device, a navigational tool, or a technology for the elevation of consciousness itself. It was a message and a mechanism. Built by survivors to preserve the knowledge of their drowned world, for a future they hoped would one day understand it. And how was this true story lost? It was overwritten. See the evidence of the historical rebranding? You see the Sphinx's original leonine head recarved into a pharaoh's face? You see the inventory stealer, which explicitly calls Khufu a restorer, not a builder. You see the conflicting dates in the pyramid shafts, a dual epic cipher that speaks of a project begun in 10,500 BC and then repaired, completed or usurped around 2500 BC, and you see the final piece of the puzzle, Ghost in the Machine. The Scam Pyramids project, using muon tomography, confirmed the existence of a massive, previously unknown void, the SPBV, above the Grand Gallery in 2017. A huge part of the machine is still hidden, its purpose unknown, a silent testament to how little we truly understand. This is the bizarre and singular focus of a small, interdisciplinary think tank known as the Coherence Initiative. They are not Egyptologists or geologists. They are information theorists. Their central work is on what they call the consilience cipher. Consilience is the principle that a theory is proven strong when multiple independent lines of evidence jump together to a single conclusion. Their quirky theory is that history is a fractured hologram. Each piece of evidence a myth, a star alignment, a tool mark is, a meaningless fragment on its own. But if you find the correct unifying narrative, the laser of a new paradigm, all the fragments suddenly snap into place, and a complete three-dimensional image of the past appears. This new timeline, they argue, the final thread is woven. The fractured hologram snaps into focus, revealing a picture of the past that is both terrifying and magnificent. You are no longer just a skeptic or a detective. You are the inheritor of a story that has been waiting 12,000 years to be told. The weight of this new history settles upon you. It is not just an academic revision. It is a fundamental revaluation of what it means to be human. The implications ripple outwards, touching everything we believe about ourselves, our past, and our future. The linear, comforting story of progress that has defined the modern era is gone. You can no longer see history as a steady, unbroken climb from primitive cave dwellers to our current technological peak. That line has been shattered. The new history is a cycle. It is a story of rise and fall, of incredible peaks of achievement, followed by devastating collapses. We are not the first. We are living in the shadow of a forgotten golden age, a high-tech civilization that was so advanced it could map the stars, engineer the planet, and manipulate the very fabric of matter, and it was wiped out. This is the first humbling realization. Our own civilization, for all its apparent power and complexity, is fragile. It is not immune to the forces, both terrestrial and cosmic, that brought the last one to its knees. Look at the world around you through new eyes. You see the myths and religions of the ancient world not as primitive superstitions, but as the degraded, fragmented science of the ancestors. The gods are not magical beings. They are a distorted memory of the brilliant scientist priests of the Shemsu Hor. The story of a fall from grace or an expulsion from a Garden of Eden is not a moral allegory. It is a literal, a historical account of a cataclysm that plunged humanity from a state of high knowledge into a dark age of survival. This is the ultimate verifiable fact you are left with. The end of the last ice age around 12,000 years ago. was a period of catastrophic global upheaval involving massive sea level rise and abrupt climate change perfectly consistent with the destruction described in global myths. This is the scar that unites all of humanity. The psychological shift is profound. We are not the masters of this planet, striding confidently into the future. We are a species with amnesia, struggling to recover the memories of who we once were. We are like a man who wakes up in a hospital with no recollection of his past life, but occasionally has vivid and inexplicable flashbacks of sudden fluency in a language. He doesn't remember learning a muscle memory for a skill he doesn't know he possesses. Our architectural marvels, our astronomical knowledge, our spiritual aspirations, are these things we invented? Or are they echoes we are rediscovering? This is the final bizarre obsession of a group so small and secretive it has no name. It is not a historical organization, it is a philosophical one. Their entire work is to contemplate what they call the echo cipher. They believe that true genius and inspiration, the aha, moments that drive human progress, are not acts of creation, they're acts of reception. Their quirky theory is that the knowledge of the lost civilization was not entirely erased. It was embedded like a watermark into the very structure of the earth, into our DNA, into the collective unconscious of our species. The cipher is learning to listen. The great innovators, the Platos, the Da Vincis, the Teslas were not inventors. They were antennas, individuals with the unique sensitivity to tune into this ancient, buried signal and receive a transmission from the past. The Giza complex, they believe, is the master antenna, a machine built to amplify that signal for all time. You stand at the end of your long journey, having synthesized a new history of humanity. It is a story that honors our ancestors not as primitive brutes, but as sophisticated scientists and sages. It reframes our own time not as an apex, but as a potential turning point, a moment where we can either repeat the mistakes of the past, succumbing to hubris and destroying ourselves, or we can finally learn the lesson that history has been trying to teach us. The lesson is one of humility, of the cyclical nature of time, and of the enduring power of knowledge to survive even the darkest of ages. The lights in your room are dim now. The whirlwind of facts, dates, and theories begins to settle. The story is complete, a vast and intricate tapestry woven from 1,000 threads of evidence. You lean back, the weight of 12,000 years of forgotten history pressing down, and you let the